Yes, ma'am. So, respected Geeta ma'am, respected Vijaya ma'am, and dear friends, we are on the third day of the training of senior secondary and senior secondary teachers of English of Madhya Pradesh. And today with us is Dr. Vijaya ma'am from EFL University Lucknow campus. Ma'am has been into EFL University for last 13 years. As you saw that we were discussing about when she joined EFLU. She have served at EFLU Hyderabad campus for quite 8 years and now shifted to Lucknow campus. EFLU has three campuses. Hyderabad, the main campus, Lucknow and Shillong. And the English and Foreign Languages University, EFL University, offers many programs, including diploma course in teaching uh, postgraduate diploma in teaching of English and postgraduate certificate in teaching of English. They are the two flagship programs of EFLU for teachers of English. We are also working on a similar program with new inputs from NEP for diploma course in teaching of English. And ma'am, Geeta ma'am, Deepa ma'am, Vijaya ma'am, most of them are in the team of bringing the course, better course as per the requirement of NEP 2020 for school teachers. So we are really bringing out new innovative things. We'll discuss once the course is ready. We'll update you also, and many of you can join also. Some of you can join the course. For the first year, we'll have a trial run. I'll update you with the details. Uh, as of now, let me welcome Dr. Vijaya ma'am, one of the really great scholars in English language teaching. Ma'am is working on the area of English, nature of English language and how languages are learned also. So I'd request ma'am to discuss because knowing how languages are learned, how languages are acquired, what is the difference between acquiring a language and learning a language? Are they same? Are they different? What's the process that goes? How, from a child's point of view, how does a child learn? Acquire it from the parents, from atmosphere, from the school. How do they learn deliberately in the school setup? What's the difference when they move from the home setup, from mother tongue setup to a school language setup? So all these are issues, and as English teachers or as language teachers, we should know how languages are learned so that we can devise our pedagogy accordingly for the maximum learning of language in the school level. So may I request ma'am to unmute and take the session on how languages are learned. Welcome, Vijaya ma'am.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm sorry, there is some issue with my system, so I was just trying to fix that. So, a very warm welcome to everybody. I don't know how Bhopal is. Lucknow is very cold right now. We're going through a cold wave. So, and the first session, obviously, I mean, many of you had to travel long distances probably and put in a lot of effort into being here. Thank you all so much for joining and being here. And I'll start today. So, the topic is how languages are learned. And I'll start today with a very small task. I am putting a link for you. It's a Mentimeter link. You can just click on that, and it's a little, four question. A questionnaire with just 4 issues. I want you to answer that. Could you let me know if you're able to access it and answer it?
All of you, the link is in the chat box. Please click on the link and you will be redirected to some Chrome or somewhere, a browser, and there you can try to answer the questions or whatever is there. There is some Mentimeter where you can vote something.
You
You
can
can
fill it and then you can submit it. It doesn't require login. You can just do it. If one of you could just let me know if it's working, you're able to access it.
Yes, ma'am, it's working. I just could access it.
Right, great. So I'll just share the screen, and I think now I'll continue to share the screen. If this is visible. Is this visible? I'm just muting myself for a minute. My, my charger is in.
By the time ma'am is there, I think you should all try to vote. There is something, the link of Mentimeter is there, and I hope all of you could access that. I think it's there. Yeah, yeah. You see that the screen is visible. Whatever you are doing is visible there. Whatever changes you are making. So directly you are controlling the screen of Vijaya ma'am over there. You see
Yes.
how it's moving. Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think they've kind of got it. In case you've not got the hang of it, just ask me. I can help you. Just unmute yourself and ask if you're not able to access it or something like that. After submitting, it might ask you to open a Mentimeter account, login or whatever. You can just submit and say finish. Click on the finish button. And if you want to explore Mentimeter, you could do that later. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Mentimeter, but Mentimeter is a very interesting tool for quick surveys like this, and I
Ma'am,
like.
I am not familiar with this. Please explain.
Sorry.
I'm not familiar with this. Please explain how to use this.
Yeah, yeah. So, ma'am, just click on the link that is given in the chat box. It'll automatically take you there, and then you can say strongly agree, disagree. You have to basically, I think you have to drag the cursor, drag the tab, depending on what response you want to give. You can see this, this, I don't know if you can see the screen here and my cursor. So this thing you can just drag and give your answers, right? You have strongly disagree on the left and strongly agree on the right. And you can see also somewhere in the middle also. If you put it here, then that is somewhere in the middle. Right. I think some people, about 22 people have done it. Dr. Ganga, do we need to give them more time?
Ma'am, up to you, 1 or 2 minutes we can give, and then you can analyze the data, ma'am.
Yeah, someone has raised the hand. Please go ahead and ask.
Many of them sometimes also raise hand by mistake. If it's really raised for a cause, please ask the question. I think it's not there. Some
Okay.
of them are responding done, etc.
Right, right. So I'll just, so this is how people have responded. And the reason for starting with this is that these are issues that will come up during our discussion, during the talk. So I'm just going to exit this, although I think some people are still answering. Um, just exit this. Right. So let me just share my screen. Start the presentation. Yeah, so this is me. And so what are we talking about? We're talking about languages. And let's try to understand what language is first. I hope I am audible. Can you hear me, Dr. Ganga, if you can confirm?
Yeah, audible, ma'am.
Right.
Audible, ma'am. Audible.
Thank you. Thank you. So you see, as human beings, we belong to a species with a certain magical ability, and that is this unique ability to give rise to thought in other brains and give shape to thought in other brains as well, brains of other human beings. And how do we do that? We do that using language. In fact, the ability to use a language is so naturalized that we often forget what a magical feat learning of a language is. Um, one of the things that language does, I mean, if you think of the role of a language in our life, one of the primary roles of language is to connect various independent members of a community to make a unified information sharing whole. Now, coming to the question of our talk today, how a language is learned. If you think about it, our understanding of languages is basically based on certain common beliefs about learning of languages. And these are kind of shared beliefs, common beliefs, which have existed for quite a few years, or you could say for sometimes for generations. Some of them are based on facts, some of them are not based on facts, some of them are proven true, some of them are not proven true. So we are going to discuss some of those today. In fact, some of these notions are so deeply ingrained in our memories that we tend to think that they are the truths about language learning, and we don't ever challenge them. And so we just go. This is what we are going to do today. We are going to talk about select issues in language learning and do a comparison with comparison between the first and second language contexts. How similar are they? How different are they? And what implications does it have for language teachers, for us language teachers? And as I was saying, we'll talk about what are some of the biases, some of the things we believe which are actually not true about language learning. Right. Yeah, so here is something that I want you to look at. Are you able to see this? Is this clear, or should I show you the actual book? This is from a book called, the name of the book is How Languages Are Learned by Lightbound and Spada. If this is not very clear, I'll show you the actual table that will be clearer, I think. Could one of you confirm if it's not blurred?
Yes, ma'am, it's clear.
It's clear, right? Thank you. Thank you so much. So if you look at it, what this table does is that if you look at the first row, first and second language, those are the two columns. And then we are talking about learner characteristics and learner conditions. Just give me one moment. Yeah, so we basically, when it comes to, these are some of the issues. This is something that I will look at, but actually, these are some of the biases that we are going to look at here. And again, there is one more little exercise that I, want you to do, and it is this one. And then we will go on. This is another task for you. If you could also fill this. And then we'll take both of these, responses, and then we'll start discussing your responses.
Please share the link in the chat box.
I'm doing that. Just give me a minute. Yeah, this is the link. It's there in the chat box. Again, the same process. Could you please keep your questions towards the end? And if you have any issues, you could just put it in the chat box. Have any questions, you can go ahead and do that. But I'll take the questions towards the end if you don't mind. Dr. Ganga, is that all right?
Right, ma'am. Questions, if any, please keep on noting them. I'll take all the questions towards the end.
Right. Yeah. So could you now go and fill this? These are some of the issues that I am talking about that we will discuss. So just take a few minutes to answer this. I don't think you can see the screen. Let me just show you the screen. Right, I'm assuming that some people have answered it. Right. So we'll just go on and we'll actually now start talking about the first issue here, which is languages are learned through imitation. Let me just exit this. So there are four issues here that you have answered. Languages are learned through imitation, number one. Second one, learner errors need to be corrected as soon as they are made, which is the general belief. And the general belief is that error corrections lead to genuine language learning. The third one, a language can be learned in a week or a month, which is the biggest fallacy, I believe. And learners make mistakes due to first language interference. So the question is that to what extent do first language interference errors matter? That is the question here. So I'm just going to exit this and go to my presentation and talk about the first issue, that is how languages are, how whether languages are learned through imitation or not. Let me just. So here, the first thing that we are going to talk about is, the role of the environment. And I'm going to begin with this issue, a very rudimentary idea, a very basic idea that a lot of people seem to have, that what's there in learning a language. But if you ask a person who's learning a foreign language, French, Spanish, or something like that, they will tell you it is not easy. And I think one of the biggest challenges for us teachers is to understand and realize that second language learning is not easy. A first language or a mother tongue is easy to learn. In fact, during childhood, we learn our first language with such ease and effortlessness that we don't even remember how and when we learned it. So, how is learning of a first language different from learning of languages later in life? For instance, English, and later in life, if we, let us say, learn a foreign language like French. How are these different from learning of a first language? Most of our learners, if you think of our learners, most of our learners come to the business of learning English having learned at least one language. They have had the experience of learning one language at least. So there are two ways of looking at this prior knowledge, because as I said, if a learner has already learned one language and then comes to the task of learning English, there is a prior knowledge of how languages are learned, prior knowledge of not how English is learned, but how languages work. So there are two ways of looking at this. The first way of looking at it is that knowledge works as an advantage, as the learners now have a basic idea of how languages work. And secondly, which is also another view, is knowing another language may mislead learners in making wrong assumptions, wrong guesses about how a second or a third language works. So, all learners who learn a language later in life, such as English, they bring a level of predetermined cognitive maturity and metalinguistic awareness to the task of learning associated with the older language learners. Older language learners have cognitive maturity and metalinguistic awareness. In case you're not very familiar with these terms, I will explain it. Cognitive maturity and metalinguistic awareness enables older learners to engage in problem solving and in understanding the structure of the language and in commenting on it. This understanding of structures of the language, how language is structured, and the ability to be able to comment on your own learning. These are particularly required by a student learning a language in a classroom. A student who has very limited opportunities of contact with the language and thinking of the language environment. Let us now look at, you remember I was trying to show you a table earlier, that is this one. Give me a moment. This table, yeah, just present it once. Yeah, if you look at this table, basically I incorporated it to get you to think about the context of learning, the different contexts of learning, and the role of the environment in language learning. So I've divided this, this is of course from Lightbound and Spada with some modifications. It's divided into learner characteristics and learning conditions. So learner characteristics are things that learners, these are things that may be learner internal. Learners bring this to the task of language learning. Now, I was talking about cognitive maturity and metalinguistic awareness. If you look at it, if you look at under learner characteristics, the second and the third row, there are two things mentioned here: cognitive maturity and metalinguistic awareness. Now, the prior knowledge of another language is an advantage in the sense that they have an idea of how the language works. If you think of very young learners, if you look at the second and the third row, young child at home, young child in the playground, adolescent in a classroom, and adult on the job. So for us, see, this is done for a Western audience. We also have a context of children learning English in the classroom. And in our context, the learning in the playground doesn't happen because our children mostly do not converse in English. So those are some of the difference in context that we need to worry about when we are thinking of how our learners are approaching the problem of language learning or language acquisition. You know, if you think of young second language learners, they begin to develop cognitive maturity and meta-linguistic awareness, but they still have very far to go in these areas, and also in the area of word knowledge, which is the, if you look at this, my cursor is there, this is the fourth learner characteristic that is mentioned here. So in order to be able to attain uh, adult-like or adolescent-like proficiency, you need to go through a journey where your cognitive maturity and meta-linguistic awareness and world knowledge develops. In the classroom context, you know, cognitive maturity and meta-linguistic awareness are of prime importance. Although some theorists believe that, you know, use of these cognitive skills interferes with language acquisition, but actually the issue is that it does help in a very big way, right? We'll keep coming back to this, you know, to this table again. Now let me go to the next issue that, you know, I want to talk about. Let's go back to this slide again. We're talking about learning conditions and, you know, the environment. Let's continue to talk about that. And I'm going to now talk about something called motheries. I'm putting the term in the chat box, motheries. What do you think the term means? Can somebody tell me? Just look at the term, look at this word. What is it made of? Mother and ease. So what do you think it means? What can it mean? You can put your responses
A
in the
person who
chat.
is comfortable with his mother tongue.
Sorry, could you say that again?
I hope a person or an individual who is comfortable at ease when he is speaking his mother tongue.
Right, that's a very, very smart guess. Anybody else? It's a very good guess. You've looked at mother and ease and you've kind of tried to put the meaning together. Anyone else would like to attempt?
I think it is connected with the ease as we speak with mother tongue. So with ease we can speak out other languages also.
Right. Yeah, it's while these are wonderful guesses and you're on the right track. Mother ease is basically another word for this is child directed speech, CDS. Putting it in the chat box. Child directed speech. What do you think it means now? I've given you another term. Can you now take a guess? What does it mean? Child directed speech. What do you think it means? People who were trying to guess motheries by putting the two parts together. Now can you modify your understanding in the light of the new term that I have given you, child-directed speech. Motheries and child-directed speech are used interchangeably. Yeah, right. So anybody?
I think, do you think it is related with Tutlana? When the child speaks to speak English or any language, he just, I think, Tutlana जिसे कहते हैं. That
जी
sort
जी
of thing.
हाँ विजय जी, अगर आप ये टर्म देखें चाइल्ड डायरेक्टेड स्पीच, तो चाइल्ड डायरेक्टेड स्पीच मीन्स स्पीच दैट इज directed at the child. So if you look at it like that, so child directed speech is basically you know, speech which forms the language input for the child. जो भाषा बच्चा सुन रहा है, जो जिस भाषा में बच्चे से बात की जा रही है, and analysis of that.
Used by a mother while speaking to the child. When the child is born.
Right. Yeah, please go on. Okay, yeah. So this child-directed speech, this has been found to, this is basically this is a result of interaction between caregivers, mothers and other caregivers and children. And across the cultures, it has been found that this particular register, this variety of language known as motherese or child directed speech, it has been found to have certain common characteristics. अच्छा, अब एक सवाल पूछते हैं आपसे, ये बताइए, especially this is a question to everybody, but especially to the mothers. When you speak to your child, do you speak to your child in the same language as when you are speaking to the rest of the people?
No, not
No.
exactly what.
Right. So what are the changes that you make in your language when you're speaking to, let us say a 5-year-old child?
Pleasing words as they like it, love it, rhyming.
Example दीजिए.
Madam,
First language से you can give me an example. कुछ sentences हिंदी में बता सकते हैं आप.
Ma'am, basically when we speak to an infant or child, we generally use the objects which are in his surroundings.
हाँ, तो जैसे you can आप मुझे एक छोटा सा कोई इंसिडेंट बता सकते हैं कि किस तरह से बात किया बच्चे से. जैसे मैम बोल रही थी, मैम शायद बता सकती हैं, आप भी बता सकते हैं. पुष्कर जी.
Ma'am, your voice is not actually clear what you are asking about.
Yeah, is it better now? Is it better? Yeah.
Ma'am, I would like to interfere here. Actually, when it's not only mother who interacts with the child when in the earlier stage.
Just a minute. Can I ask others to mute themselves? No, there is an echo. Someone else is unmuted. Yes, please continue. हाँ सर.
I am Vijaya Verma, ma'am.
जी.
Ma'am, shall I speak?
Sound is not coming clear.
Ma'am, actually, it's not only the mother who interacts with the child in early years of life in childhood. Even when I talk to my daughter, I should say when I talk in mother tongue, I usually use gestures, hand movements, and also the language in which the child is comfortable. I'm just giving a small example. My child used to say, my daughter used to say, chup chup to the slippers. So I usually say, where is your chup chup? So because I want her to know that what I want to convey, and
Right.
she will understand better in what she understands.
Right. Yeah. So as I said that parents have a way of modifying what they say for the children, and this is known as motherese. And there is another term that we use in the literature which is called teacher talk. In fact, my MPhil was actually a comparison of teacher talk and motherese. So now, what are the kind of changes that parents are making to the language when, let us say, the parents, aapne kaha chap chap. So chap chap means you're actually trying to use the term that that the child is using, which is a simplified version of adult speech. So let me just please keep yourself muted. Someone's frequency is interfering with this. So when you unmute yourself, what happens is we are not able to hear anything. There is a huge echo. So I'm going to just show you now some of these features of the language that are particular to motherese, and then we'll compare that with teacher talk. There's something called teacher talk, which is the language that teachers use, modified input basically. Here, for example, mothers and other caregivers in the environment use, it could be the father or it could be older siblings or uncles and aunts. use simplified sentences that are shorter. Uh, they tend to use exaggerated speech melody. Your pitch is a little exaggerated. Like for instance, for adults we'll say "Kya kar rahe ho," and for children we'll say "Kya kar rahe ho." So you see, I have when you say "Kya kar rahe ho," you've varied the melody. Then we use diminutive forms like, like you said, chup chup, that's a diminutive form. In English, you can, think of horsey and doggy and, small versions of the bigger terms. And there is a lot of repetition of words and sentences, and shortening and simplifying of words. Now, do you think this in any way tells you something about how we should be approaching basic language teaching in the early years of English? Do you think this has implications? Do you think there's something we can learn as teachers from this approach towards talking to children? Anyone? Can we take
Yes,
this learning?
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
please.
definitely. These diminutive forms and words, like the simplified version of the words, definitely help them, because they, what I feel is the child is more familiar with these words, because according to him, if we give him a difficult word which he doesn't understand, will make no sense. And these words, when spoken, will give him a comfort level where he can understand the language. At least a language doesn't have its meaning when it is not understood and not interpreted by the listener. So at least he will interpret, and then later on, slowly we can modify these words again, and he will again hear the words from others. He will learn. So at that particular time, he requires that help, and which we are providing.
Right. So I'll share an interesting fact about proficiency teaching at our university. We have proficiency courses for people from within India and from other countries as well. And what happens is when they come in, we divide them into three levels: basic, intermediate, and advanced. Usually, the teachers who teach the basic level uh, are not easy to find. Not everybody wants to attempt the basic level. And the reason for that is, I believe, as someone having taught proficiency to, English proficiency to foreign students, I know that the basic level is the most challenging, because it is not very easy to modify your language to the level of knowledge of the language at a basic level that the learners bring to class. So, I'm going to now give you, a short kind of a task here. I'll just paste it here for you, and you can tell me how you will modify that. Let us say, I'll give you a sentence. I'm putting it here in the chat box. Yeah, have a look at this sentence. It's there in the chat box. Have a look at this sentence, and let us say your learners don't have much English. How will you modify it? How will you make it simpler? This is a very simple spoken sentence. Dr. Ganga, how much time do I have? Can somebody tell me how long I can go on? Is it 11 up? Can I go on up to 11:45?
We can say, ma'am, open your book and read it.
Okay. Any other options? Yes, that's a very good idea. Yes. So you've kind of, when you say open your, yeah.
Open your book
Read
on page number
5 of your book.
Okay. Put your answer in the chat box, ma'am. Let's have a look at it. Yeah, see, but if you say open page 5 to read, yeah, that's a very good suggestion, because it has everything in a nutshell. So the idea is that your sentences for a very, very basic learner needs to be shorter. This is what we were talking about, simplified sentences. Right. If you can also simplify the second one that I have posted, because that's a sentence that we are more likely to use very often. That's an instruction actually. So first one was a spoken sentence. The second is not a spoken sentence. How would you simplify it for your learner?
You can say, ma'am, make a story with the correct sentence form.
Right, right. Okay, someone has said arrange these sentences. I'm putting one of my options. So sometimes we don't even realize that that we need to simplify things, and it's something very simple. And what does it do if we are simplifying sentences? Now I'm going to bring in another concept here. That is I plus one. It's known as comprehensible input. I'll just quickly talk about that because we don't have too much time. So this connects to another concept in language learning known as comprehensible input. The idea of comprehensible input was basically given by someone called Stephen Krashen. And basically the idea is that the input, the language that the child hears, that the child interacts with, that language is the input actually. So the input has to be modified, it has to be provided in such a way that it is at I plus one level. Now, what is I plus one level? Does anyone know? If you know, please put it in the chat box. If you're familiar with the concept, put it in the chat box, please. Anyone? Okay. Yeah. So what is comprehensible input? This was an idea given by Stephen Krashen. And the idea here is that when you are teaching, your teaching has to be pitched at such a level that the level of your language, whether it is through tasks or the level of the text, the reading text, or the level of the writing that you're doing, or the level of listening you're doing, the level of language being used, the level of language that students are working with, that a particular student is working with, has to be the level that is just one level above the current level of knowledge of that particular student. So let us say the learner is at level 2 of knowledge of English. It has to be 2 plus 1. The teaching has to be pitched at the level of 2 plus 1. And why is that done? It's done to keep the task of learning challenging. That's the whole point of I plus 1. So now let me go on to the next. Here we were talking about, if you remember, we were I'm sorry, we were talking about these issues. Let me go back to these. Right. The second one, a language can be learned in a week or a month. आप लोग को क्या लगता है, क्या ये जो काफी आप देखेंगे बाजार में एड्स वगैरह लगे रहते हैं कि 1 महीने में अंग्रेजी सीखें? Have you seen those? Who has seen these ads? Please raise your hand.
Yes.
हाँ, 1 महीने में अंग्रेजी सीखें, yeah, something like that. I find it very amusing when I see that. What is your opinion of that? Can one of you or two of you just tell me what you think of that? What is your response?
Madam, language cannot be learned. Not only they are talking about a week or a month, but it takes years to learn a language. If you are into a language and you give your 100%, it requires a lot of time, lot of courage, lot of dedication to learn a language.
Definitely. Completely agree with that. Um,
Ma'am, can I say something?
in fact, all, yeah, please.
Ma'am, actually, they are playing with the sentiment also because they know that everyone is eager to learn English as fast as possible. So they just want, they want to earn. So they play with the sentiment. You come and we will teach you English in 1 month, 2 weeks. So people get excited. Okay, this can be done in a month. They are earning.
So how many people have fallen for this actually? Are there people who have fallen for this? And I mean, I wouldn't say fallen for this, but I mean, sometimes we go for what is available. Sometimes courses नहीं होते हैं तो हम मजबूरी में courses करते हैं. I'm sure there are teachers there who have gone for these courses, and you will realize that they don't really benefit you. And why is that? Because too much is being kind of crammed into that moment. So all of you, please mute yourself because there's some background noise. Please mute yourself, all of you. Please mute yourself. Thank you. Thank you. Um, so learning, the point here is what is the point that that I am trying to make here. The point that I'm trying to make here is that learning is not it's not an all or none affair. It is a slow, deliberate process, and learning is something that happens bit by bit. It's not something that happens overnight, and you can't say that today today morning I'll start learning English, and then after a month I'll become a master of English. It doesn't work like that. And which is why you have to also in a very I would say very judiciously also think about the number of hours of exposure that our learners have to the language. And to my mind, the opportunities that our learners have of listening to English, of working with English, interacting with English, listening especially, which is a very important form of input, there are very few opportunities that our learners have. And in fact, in India, in most of the classrooms, teacher might be the only source of input in English. So you see how important we are. And that takes us to this question. When I say, I've said it here, learning is a slow, deliberate process, and learning is incremental. Now that takes us to another issue, which I would like to talk about here. Is, and I'm putting this. There's a question for you in the chat box. Please look at that question. Do your learners speak, read, and write and listen to all languages with equal ease? Why not? Do you think your knowledge of Hindi is at the same level as your knowledge of English? Is the same as the level of your knowledge in Sanskrit? Is the same as your knowledge in Urdu? Is the same as your knowledge in Kannada, or whichever language? So let us say you speak 3 languages. Anybody? Penny for your thoughts?
It is not possible to have similar sort of knowledge in all the languages. Even though I am a native speaker of Hindi, my Hindi is not that good as I use English, because what I feel is, because I am not in regular touch, I am not in habit of reading those books or paying more attention to it. Whereas in English, every day in classroom I teach English. I try to speak to everyone, my colleagues and all, in English. I do read English books frequently. I listen to the news and also I hope since I am into that language for a longer period of time, the progress in that particular language is much better than the other language.
Right. Please have a look at this. I think that particular view was not very I don't think you were able to read it. So I'm just projecting another version of the same thing. Look at this now. So this is what we were talking about, learner characteristics, and then here learning conditions. These actually are what make a difference. Why is the starting point, of course, when you started learning, but other than that, what really makes a difference to your pace of learning, to the level of your learning, are all of these things. Now that brings me to another important issue here. Right, and that is basically, do you think, now let's talk about English. Let's take one language and talk. We were talking about issues across languages. Now let's focus on just one language, let us say English. Have you had this experience where a student speaks very fluent English and therefore you tend to be biased and mark the student high in writing as well? Have you had this experience? How many have gone through that? It's happened to me. So if a student is very fluent in speech, I tend to think that, oh, the person will be good at writing also. Has that happened to you? Raise your hand if it's happened to you. It's a very common thing that happens to teachers. Please raise your hand if it has happened to you. Yes, it's a very and it's very easy to be carried away. Please mute yourself. Thank you. Thank you. Right. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think most of the people agree, over there on that account. I think we are in agreement that the level of all the skills that learner know will not be the same. And which is why, which takes us to the previous idea that I was talking about, that learning is incremental, and learning is not uniform. So let us say somebody might be fantastic with vocabulary and not so great with grammar, and somebody might be fantastic with the grammar, not so great with vocabulary. Someone's listening skill might not be a strength. Yeah. So
Excuse me, ma'am, what is this incremental? Can you explain?
So, okay, I am not able to hear you, sir. Could you put it in the chat box? You're not very audible. Just put it quickly in the chat box, or maybe you can say it again. Just try. Explain what again? Incremental. Okay, right. Rajeshji, it was you, I think, who was asking me, right? So incremental is
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah.
जी राजेश जी. हाँ, incremental मतलब कि जैसे थोड़ा थोड़ा करके होता है, स्मॉल बिट्स में होता है, स्मॉल पीसेस में होता है. तो which again takes us to another issue. हम अगर कुछ पढ़ाते हैं तो क्या हम अस्यूम करें बच्चे ने सीख लिया? क्या ऐसा होता है? Does it work like that? Is input equal to learning? Whatever we teach, क्या वो बच्चा सीख लेता है? क्या बच्चा हर वो चीज सीख रहा है जो आप पढ़ा रहे हैं? या फिर कभी कभी ऐसा भी होता है बच्चा बहुत कुछ ऐसा सीख रहा है जो आप नहीं पढ़ा रहे हैं, लेकिन एनवायरनमेंट में है, चारों तरफ है और किताब में है. Has this happened to you? It does. It happens to me. Sometimes my learners, if I give them a reading text, I'm discussing something else, and learners ask me something which is totally different, which comes from their word knowledge, which is a combination of their word knowledge and their interaction with the text. So that brings us to another point of discussion here, which is how much of learning do you think is governed by the role of environment? तो एनवायरनमेंट का कितना रोल होता है लर्निंग में आपके हिसाब से? कितनी चीजें, कितने परसेंट, लेट अस असाइन अ परसेंटेज टू इट. कितनी चीजें, जैसे 10 चीजें अगर बच्चा सीख रहा है तो उसमें से कितनी चीजें आपको लगता है बच्चा क्लास से सीख रहा है, आपकी टीचिंग से सीख रहा है, और कितना परसेंटेज आपको लगता है कि बच्चा सीख रहा है अपने आप कहीं से? what percentage of learning do you think is done on their own by the learners? You can put it in the chat box. So you have two categories: learning on their own, that is one category. इसका क्या percentage है आपके हिसाब से बच्चे की learning life में? 80% is learning on their own. तो जब हम learning on their own कहते हैं, तो learning on their own के माने क्या हैं? हम what are you visualizing? Can you give me क्या क्या चीजें बच्चे अपने आप सीखते हैं? Please tell me. So I can see the percentages that are coming up as 60%, 80%, which, and I'm so happy to see that you acknowledge that and you understand that, because a lot of things that children learn are not really what we are trying to teach them. The children learn, yeah, somebody said by observation. Children primarily learn by observation, and so do adults. You know, our ability to learn through observation, through our environment, and sometimes we pick up things, very unconsciously. Like, I don't know about this new craze of watching Korean series. The young people are nowadays, if you have young, teenage children, they will tell you कि they are actually watching Korean series. और वो Korean series देख देख के बहुत से बच्चे Korean बोल रहे हैं, and this is not something that is being taught to them. They're just watching, they're learning from films. So a lot of learning that happens in classroom is actually learning that is happening outside of the class. So what does it imply for us as teachers? It implies that it is very important to connect our learning with learning outside the class. It is very important for us to take on board that the learning that the child is bringing to the task of learning. अगर टेक्स्ट बुक पढ़ाना इंपॉर्टेंट है, तो उस टेक्स्ट बुक को बच्चे की लाइफ से कनेक्ट करना एक्चुअली उससे भी ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है, क्योंकि लर्निंग तभी होगी जब इसमें एक सामंजस्य होगा और हम ये कह पाएंगे कि जो टेक्स्ट बुक में पढ़ाया जा रहा है उसका एप्लीकेशन बच्चा रियल लाइफ में समझ रहा है, जो बच्चा बाहर समझ के आया. जैसे लेट अस टेक अ वेरी सिंपल एग्जांपल ऑफ, कभी कभी बच्चों को प्रोजेक्ट दिया जाता है कि एक छोटा पौधा लगाओ और पौधे को क्लास में लेके आओ. सो द लर्निंग दैट इज हैपनिंग ओवर देयर इज हाउ टू टेक केयर ऑफ द प्लांट, हाउ टू टेक केयर ऑफ समथिंग एल्स, somebody else, and also how to understand the growth of the plant. Now it is very important for us as teachers to bridge that gap between the actual learning that is happening outside the class and the textbook learning or whatever we are going to teach in terms of concepts, whether it is language or it is content subject. So I'm going to briefly give you a short kind of a brief overview of some of the theories. In 1959, in his review of in 1959 is when Chomsky reviewed B.F. Skinner's work. But before that, let me talk about B.F. Skinner, the book called Verbal Behavior. So for a very long time, this whole idea of learning by imitation, ये काफी समय तक ये सोचा जाता था कि लर्निंग जितनी भी होती है ये बच्चे आसपास देख के ही सीखते हैं. सारी लर्निंग डिपेंडेंट होती है एनवायरनमेंट में. रिमेंबर आई वाज टॉकिंग अबाउट रोल ऑफ द एनवायरनमेंट. तो जो इनिशियल व्यू था, which was inspired by the behaviorist idea of, the term was verbal behavior, learning of the verbal behavior. So the initial idea was कि learning जो भी होती है वो होती है through imitation. The key words, I will just put down the key words for you here. What were the key words in those days, during the heydays of behaviorism? Can somebody tell me what were some of the key terms? Do you know? Behaviorism में key terms क्या use होते हैं learning के लिए? Chat box में आप डाल सकते हैं, आपको अगर पता है तो. Behaviorism में जो हम key terms use करते हैं वो क्या होते हैं? Archana ji, now am I audible? Can you hear me?
Ma'am, you are audible.
Right. Thank you. Imitation, right? Fantastic. What else? Imitation के अलावा There was another term, observation and imitation, right? There's another key term that I'm looking for here, and I will show it to you. Just a moment. Yeah. So some of the key terms that made the basis of the behaviorist thought, and of course we let me also kind of remind you that these ideas do come from psychology, but they have all these ideas have been applied to language learning as well. Okay, so समझ में आ रहा है मेरी बात, या मैं फिर अपना कनेक्शन स्विच करूं, दूसरे पे जाऊं?
Madam, it's understandable. Madam, it's understandable.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think it is time for me to wrap up also. So I will just wrap up with these two concepts that I want to. I want to talk about Skinner, and I want to talk about Chomsky. Skinner, one of the leading figures who are associated with behaviorism, and then I'm going to talk about Chomsky, who is talking about the innate perspective in language learning. हाँ, तो behaviorism से related ये देखिए, आप अगर screen पे देखें आपके, imitation and positive reinforcement. Basically these are the main terms which are associated with behaviorism. So the behaviorist idea of learning a language was that children are learning directly from the environment. What is being taught is equal to what is being learned. There was a lot of repetition, there was a lot of practice happening. That was the behaviorist model of language teaching. And then if you come to the later view in 1959, in his review of B.F. Skinner's book, Verbal Behavior, it was Chomsky. We are now going to talk about Chomsky, Noam Chomsky. He argued that children are biologically predisposed to learning languages. In fact, language development is very much like other biological functions in children. Just as all children learn to walk, learn to ride a bicycle, children learn languages, and they don't really need to be taught when they are born, which is true. हम अपने बच्चों को भाषा बोलना सिखाते नहीं है, बच्चे अपने आप सीखते हैं, हमें पता भी नहीं होता बच्चा कैसे पिकअप कर रहा है, एंड सडनली बच्चे खूब सारे वर्ड्स बोलने लगते हैं, फ्रेजेस बोलने लगते हैं, एंड वी डोंट नो वेयर इट्स कमिंग फ्रॉम, एंड समटाइम्स they are unstoppable, especially when children start picking up galis. They are quite unstoppable, and you don't even know where they're coming from, but your child is picking it up from the environment. It's so this interplay of the environment and the role of the innate ability of the child. I believe that both of them have a role to play in different aspects of language learning and teaching. Now, for example, how do we know how to form sentences in the first languages? They just happen. And in English also, you'll realize if you actually track the development of language, you will realize that while learning the language, you will see what is the process that people go through. Words, phrases, sentences. These are, there can be a more fine-grained analysis of all of this, but मोटा मोटा अगर देखें तो 3 स्टेज समझ लीजिए. वर्ड सीखा, फ्रेजेस सीखे, सेंटेंसेस सीखा. स्पीच की बात करनी है, लेट्स जस्ट स्टिक टू स्पीच राइट नाउ. तो ये 3 चीजें आप 3 लेवल समझ लीजिए इसके. So how does this transition from phrases to words happen? It's like magic. It just happens one day. So that is what the innate ability is. And also, if you look at your grammaticality judgment, कि कभी-कभी आपसे कोई पूछता है कि ये सेंटेंस सही है, तो आप कहते हैं हाँ ये सेंटेंस सही है और ये गलत है, लेकिन आप ये नहीं बता पाते हैं कि क्यों गलत है. And you tell yourself, my instinct tells me that it is not correct. Something's telling, but you can't really put a finger on it. But what is that? That is your innate ability. That is coming from your innate sense of the language that you have. So in the 1940s and 50s, under the influence of research which happened during the behaviorist days under B.F. Skinner and the later behaviorists, it was believed that imitation and practice were the cornerstones of language teaching practice. And imitation and practice were the two very important terms. And later, after 1959 and Chomsky's review of verbal behavior, it came to be, it kind of, the perspective changed, and people started believing that language learning can no longer be viewed as just a formation of set of habits by learners, which was the idea in the behaviorist time. Language learning is not just based on imitation. Instead, it can also be viewed as an internal operation, and in this process, language is acquired by each learner using an innate linguistic device in the human brain, which is someone was presenting. This innate language device that I was talking about, I'll just put it in the chat box. Language acquisition device. This was proposed by Chomsky. So he said that all human beings are born, unless they have a brain injury, all human beings are born with a language acquisition device, which helps them automatically acquire language. Now, it's not something, it's not like an organ of the brain. It's an abstract concept, basically, language acquisition device, which tends to kind of control the operations of language, in our mind. Dr. Ganga, do I have more time or shall I stop? Can somebody tell me if I can go on? I think my time is up.
Ma'am, I think we should stop now. If we can take one or two questions,
right?
If there are.
Yeah. Any questions?
Wind up, ma'am. Yes. Take some time and wind up 2-3 minutes, ma'am.
Yeah. Anybody wants to ask a question, just unmute yourself or put it in the chat box.
Ma'am, please explain further the behaviorist theory and the innate learning theory a bit.
Right. Yeah, I'll also, I'm noting down the question. So that is one. Anybody else? I think more people are raising their hands, and then I will just quickly answer all of them.
Ma'am, Jean Piaget denies the aspect of LED, language acquisition device, of what you say. What I mean, मतलब आप पियाजे को मानेंगी या फिर चॉम्स्की को, तो हम क्या मतलब मान के चलें कि एलईडी बच्चे में होता है, जीन पियाजे इसको नहीं मानते, तो क्या सही माना जाए? मतलब
See, as a language teacher, I'm not thinking, I'm not willing to take a stand. I do not take a stand because I'm a language teacher, and my approach towards these things is, as a language teacher, I read these things, I process these things, and then I think, what are some of the things that my students are doing, and how are some of these ideas? As I said, my approach to these things is that all these ideas are relevant. If Piaget is relevant, Chomsky is also relevant. That is my take. I am, a language acquisition researcher, and over the years, I have understood that linguists take a stand, but as a teacher, I don't take a stand on these things. And the reason for that is, अगर आप सोचें, practically सोचें, so can you really deny the innate ability that we have? जब आप वर्ड से सेंटेंसेस की तरफ मूव करते हैं, तो कहाँ से इतने सेंटेंसेस आ जाते हैं बच्चे के पास? एकदम से बोलना शुरू करते हैं. If you observe children suddenly one fine day, they break into so many sentences. And please remember, these sentences are not sentences that children are learning from the environment of words at all the time. Many of these sentences are novel sentences. तो ऐसा नहीं कि सारा सेंटेंस जो बच्चा बोल रहा है वो मम्मी से सुना है या पापा से सुना है. ये एबिलिटी की नए सेंटेंसेस कैसे फॉर्म करें, ये कहाँ है? That is the language acquisition device. This sense, that is the language acquisition device. And the role of the environment is very important. As I was talking about, teacher talk and motheries, that is also important, because see, we are talking about second language learners. And for second language learners, all these concepts, my years of teaching, I have found all of them to be useful and applicable to different points of learning and at different aspects of learning as well. So that is my response to that question, by the way.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Any other question? Otherwise, what I'll do is I'll just quickly talk a little more about the earlier question that the person had asked about innate and the role of the environment
Ma'am,
and
we have another session starting at 12
ah,
and we want to give them break for 5 minutes at least. Maybe,
sure. Please go ahead. I think
like
I tried to make the session interactive, so I have addressed many of the questions already. So thank you everyone for being here. I hope you found my session useful, and I hope it will help you in real language teaching. Thank you, Dr. Geeta Rajan, for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Uh, yes, yes. Thank you, ma'am. On behalf of the whole NCERT team, I'd like to thank Dr. Vijaya, ma'am, for taking out her time. She was very busy, and I had a very tough time convincing ma'am. Her whole house is renovated, and she had a very, even during vacation, she had a very hard time. She's also working on two similar projects. One on the module writing of this course, diploma course in teaching of English, and the other on language lab. So she was really busy with the homework and the professional work. Even during free holiday time, I troubled her and requested her to talk on this topic. It was a relevant topic and required topic. So thank you very much, ma'am, for accepting our request and talking on this topic. And I hope this must have been a very useful session for our participants to know how languages are learned, and once they know how languages are learned, they'll make it they'll use the same information knowledge to enable the learners to have maximum learning of the language, whatever language they're teaching in the school level. So thank you very much. As you can see in the chat, it's filled with a lot of information about a wonderful session, good session, and all. So even participants have a lot to say on this. So I'd like to thank on behalf of all the participants also. All the masses can be summed that it was really a wonderful session. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Dr. Ganga, I would like to just one parting shot. I think there are people who are interested in reading in the area. So I'll share some of the links with you. If you could just share it with them.
Oh,
Yes. Yeah, and everyone, please answer. I have put a Google Doc here. Please go and answer this questionnaire on language learning. I would like to know what you think of language learning and what your experience with your language learners are. Please do take some time to offer this. This is important for me. Thank you so much. Thank you. And
I'll share the link in the group so that all of you can all of you can do that. I have two groups. What I'm doing is that I'm planning to have a common group for all, so that you all can access it at one place. So I'll try to have a common group and I'll post the link. Ma'am, if you can share those links to my personal WhatsApp, I'll circulate them in the groups.
I've done that.
Highlight. All right. So thank you very much, ma'am. And would like to take a pause here for 10 minutes. You can grab a cup of tea or a coffee or something, and we'll start at 12:05. In 7 minutes, we'll start. The break will be slightly shorter. 12:05, we'll start the next session. Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am. Namaskar.
Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Hello. Hello, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Boli, ma'am.
Can I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir. I'm Safia Khan. Sir, can you please share us the recording of all the sessions so far, as well as further session on YouTube or Facebook? That will be helpful in future also, sir.
Yes, yes. Session on textbook.
Facebook.
These complete sessions, sir.
Complete sessions on Facebook.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you have an option. You can do it on YouTube also, Dr.
I'll try to share the recording with you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. I'll do that.
Actually, sir, before this, British counselors also have shared their recordings on Facebook, sir. So I think you also can share.
Facebook, I don't know exactly, but YouTube, I'll try to do, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ganga. I'm
Because
logging out.
sir, because these sessions are like treasure, and we should conserve these treasures.
गंगा सर लास्ट टाइम 2019 में हमने ट्रेनिंग ली थी वहाँ पर भोपाल आई में, तो हमको एक टेक्स्ट बुक मटेरियल मिला था एनसीईआरटी से, तो बहुत ही फैंटास्टिक मटेरियल था वो, और मैं उसको बहुत बार पढ़ा हूँ, काफ़ी टॉपिक उसमें कवर किए थे।
Ganga sir, you are not audible.
Let us take a small break. And then we'll discuss further. Thank you very much.
Okay.
From break lane, you will discuss further, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ganga. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am. We'll meet in next 5 minutes.
Thank you, ma'am.